The curriculum of a school. Question. Could you give us a view of the curriculum of a school from inside the school, so to speak? Answer. In our teaching, we must group correctly these elements: the pupils, the teacher, and the circumstances of study. Only at the right time and place, with the teacher suitable to these, and with the right body of students, can our studies be said to be capable of coherent development. Does this sound difficult or unreasonable? Let us compare these requirements with an analogy of our needs, the ordinary educational institution. If we are learning, say, physics, we must have a man skilled in physics, students who want to learn and who have capacity and some background for the study, and adequate laboratories and other facilities for the studies to take place. A physics teacher could not make any real progress with a class of idiots, or people who primarily wanted power or fame or gain through physics. These factors would be getting in the way of the teaching. A class of brilliant students, faced with a man who knew no physics, or who only had a smattering, would make little progress. A good teacher, with a suitable student body, could do little unless the instruments and equipment, the building, and so on were available as and when needed. If anything is strictly demanded by the teachers of perpetual higher teaching, it is these requirements. Yet this principle, so well established in conventional studies of all kinds, is largely passed over and has fallen into disuse among esotericists. Why? Because they have a primitive and unenlightened attitude towards teaching. Like an oaf who has just heard of physics or only seen some of its manifestations, the would-be student wants it all now. He does not care about the necessary presence of other students. He wants to skip the curriculum, and he sees no connection between the building and the subject of physics. So he does not want a laboratory. Just observe what happens when people try to carry on learning or teaching without the correct grouping of the three essentials. Would-be students always try to operate their studies with only one or at most two of the three factors. Teachers try to teach those who are unsuitable because of the difficulties of finding enough people to form a class. Students who have no teacher try to teach themselves. Transpose this into a group of people trying to learn physics, and you will see some of their problems. Others group themselves around the literature and methodology of older schools, trying to make the scrap material of someone else's physics laboratory work. They formalize rituals, become obsessed by principles and slogans, assign disproportionate importance to the elements which are only tools, but which they regard as a more significant heritage. Anyone can think of several schools, cults, religions, systems of psychology or philosophy which fall into the above classifications. We must categorically affirm that it is impossible to increase human knowledge in the higher field by these methods. The statistical possibility of useful gains within a reasonable time is so remote as to be excluded from one's calculations. Why, then, do people persist in raking over the embers and looking for truth when they have so little chance of finding it? Simply because they are using their conditioning propensity, not their capacity for higher perception, to try to follow the path. There is intellectual stimulus and emotional attraction in the mere effort to plumb the unknown. When the ordinary human mind encounters evidences of a higher state of being, or even when it conceives the possibility of them, it will invariably conclude that there is some possibility of progress for that mind without the application of the factors of teaching, teacher, students, time and place, which are essentials. Man has few alternatives in his search for truth. He may rely upon his unaided intellect and gamble that he is capable of perceiving truth or even the way to truth. This is a poor but an attractive gamble. Or he can gamble upon the claims of an individual or institution which claims to have such a way. This gamble, too, is a poor one. Aside from a very few, men in general lack a sufficiently developed perception to tell them, 1. not to trust their own unaided mentation, and 2. Whom or what to trust. There are, in consequence, 2 main schools of thought in this matter. Some say, follow your own promptings. The other says, trust this or that institution. Each is really useless to the ordinary man. Each will help him to use up his time. The bitter truth is that before man can know his own inadequacy or the competence of another man or institution, he must first learn something which will enable him to perceive both. Note well that his perception itself is the product of right study, not of instinct or emotional attraction to an individual, nor yet of desiring to go it alone. This is learning how to learn. All this means, of course, that we are postulating here the need for preparatory study before schoolwork takes place. We deny that a man can study and properly benefit from schoolwork until he is equipped for it, any more than a person can study space navigation until he has a grasp of mathematics. This is not to say that a man or a woman cannot have a sensation of truth, but the unorganized and fragmented mind, which is most people's heritage, tends to distort the quality and quantity of this sensation, leading to almost completely false conclusions about what can or should be done. This is not to say either that man cannot take part in studies and activities which impinge upon that portion of him which is connected with a higher life and cognition. But the mere application of special techniques will not transform that man's consciousness. It will only feed into and disturb, more or less permanently, centers of thought and feeling where it does not belong. Thus it is that something which should be a blessing becomes a curse. Sugar, shall we say, for a normal person is nutritionally useful. To a diabetic, it can be poison. Therefore, before the techniques of study and development are made available to the student, he must be enabled to profit by them in the direction in which they are supposed to lead, not in a short-term indulgence. Thus, our curriculum takes 2 parts. The first is the providing of materials of a preparatory nature, in order to equip the individual to become a student. The second is the development itself. If we, or anyone else, supply such study or preparatory material prematurely, it will only operate on a lower level than it could. The result will be harmless at best. At worst, it will condition, train the mind of the individual to think and behave in patterns which are nothing less than automatic. In this latter way, one can make what seem to be converts unwittingly play upon emotions, on lesser desires and the conditioning propensity, train people to loyalty to individuals, found and maintain institutions which seem more or less serious or constructive. But no real progress towards knowledge of the human being and the other dimension in which he partly lives will, in fact, be made. The preparation of the student is as important as anything else he does. The Sufi poet Hafiz says, "The seeker must not be unaware of the way and method of the stages." This awareness comes through following the teaching course, which is taking part in the activities of a school, plus abiding by the directions of your teacher. In learning how to learn from a Sufi school, the intending student should take note of this admonition, which indicates his difficulties. If you are too soft, you will be crushed. If you are too dry, you will be broken. If you are too hard, you will cause hurt. If you are too sharp, you will inflict wounds. The curriculum of a school is one which may work with secondary things, but which employs them instrumentally, and certainly not imagining that they are primary things. In the words of Sheikh al-Intaki, quoted over 1,000 years ago by Hujwiri in his Revelation of the Veiled, the honor of the ordinary person is to accept secondary things as real causes, while the honor of the dervish is to reject secondary supposed causes, insisting on the cause. The school works with what is primary. The, to some, apparently purposeful activity of those who use correct materials but apply only the ordinary limited senses is portrayed in the actions of Nasruddin with his seedlings. Right idea, wrong materials. The mullah once spent a whole day transplanting some seedlings in his garden. When he stood back to admire his work, a sudden thought struck him. Dusk was falling as he started to pluck the plants from the ground, wrapping them in sackcloth by the light of a lantern. Going home along the fields, some cronies called to him, "Whatever are you doing, Nasruddin?" "Acting in accordance with careful consideration. I realized, late in the day, but not too late, as you see, that it is better to keep one's property in the house, under proper supervision." The secondary or commanding self in everyone is the false self which everyone takes to be the real one. It stands in relation to the real being of the person as the face does to the person, virtually a persona. Everyone, says Rumi in Fihi ma Fihi, likes a mirror, and is enamored of the reflection in the mirror of his attributes and attainment, though he does not know the real nature of his face. The veil which he sees on the looking-glass he imagines to be his face. Take the covering from your face, so that you may see me as the mirror of your real face, so that you will realize that I am a mirror. The curriculum of a school, from inside the school, as you put it, is based on the teacher being able to be that mirror. He is therefore able to assess the peculiarities and needs of the student. His miming is often of the student, so that the latter may see himself mirrored and react accordingly. Knowing all about someone. Question: is it enough to associate with a man of knowledge to acquire some of it? Does the teacher not need the student? Answer: you must remember instances, at least, when you have not said anything and everything in your mind. Have you ever thought about the people whom you may know who do not discuss with you things which they know, even though such things might be of abiding interest to you? You may know a man well, even meet him every day of your life, share his opinions, exchange ideas. At the same time, you may have no conception of his possession of certain knowledge, and even of his capacity to pass it on, if the conditions are correct. He may not seem an enigma to you, but he may be as deeply concealed as anything on earth. The conception that one knows all about a person because of shared experiences and the exchange of confidences is not a true one. It is based upon the misconception that people cannot avoid communicating whatever they are discussing with one another. Knowledge does not automatically brush off, any more than it can be transmitted by words alone. Neither is it to be conveyed by training of any ordinary kind. You cannot therefore learn real knowledge merely by associating with someone who has it, especially if you do not even know that it is there, and if you are not focused correctly to learn. Someone or something has first to impart to you how to perceive the presence of knowledge. Without preparation, there can be no teaching. As to the need of the teacher, the great teacher Jami in his Laway says, in Essay 21, "The absolute does not stand in need of the relative, except for its manifestation, but the relative needs the absolute for its very existence." Similarly, the teacher is to be regarded as more important than the student in the situation of learning. That is to say, the teacher is so to be regarded by the learner. The teacher himself may regard the learner as more important, but that is a matter for the teacher, and there is no point discussing his attitudes when the conversation is about learning and not teaching. Remarks upon the matter of the dervish path. Question: can you give us a number of outstanding points which should be studied by those interested in the dervish, the Sufi, path? How do the miracles attributed to Sufis come about? Answer: 1. The human environment produces certain subtle changes in the individual which penetrate his whole being. Instead of undergoing only these changes, man has a chance to gain access to a form of self which is, by comparison, infinitely superior. To use the technical term, he is at present only half awake. 2. This change, although it increases man's awareness of his destiny, does not interfere with his ordinary human relationships. On the contrary, it enriches them. 3. In order to take part in this process, there has to be the coincidence of a teacher with the doctrine, the application of the doctrine in a way suited to the pupils, and the right environmental circumstances. Nothing less than all these factors will do. 4. One way of rendering the message given here is that there is a deeper truth and a wider dimension in which man already partly lives, though he is ordinarily indifferent to it. There is the hope that he can become as aware of it as he is of the familiar world. 5. The self-realization of this dimension enables a man or woman to attain heights of achievement in the easily perceptible world and in other areas, and prevents him from becoming the tool of a mere conditional existence, with all its anxieties and ultimate meaninglessness. Man tends to be unhappy not because of what he knows, but because of what he does not know. 6. It is only through the attunement of a group of people, each with the possibility of this attainment, correctly harmonized into a true community, whether physically in contact or otherwise, that true understanding and the next step in human progress can come. 7. The unity and integration of this group are essential to individual as well as collective success. In fact, almost the only opportunity for man to realize his individual importance is through the support of a group of suitable people. 8. This doctrine and the manner of its application have been known and propagated from time immemorial. They are, in fact, the property and destiny of man. They link with a past in which this development was much more widely known, through a present where it has fallen into disuse except for a few, to a future in which the great work will be the entire legitimate goal of mankind. 9. The new man, the real man, the perfected man, all are terms used in different formulations throughout the ages for this activity, which has been called secret, hidden, or initiatory, for reasons other than people realize. People are interested in miracles when they would do better to be interested in truth. Miracles are byproducts or else part of the special extra-dimensional activity in which certain people are involved. This involvement is because they acquire added functions with every addition of knowledge or capacity, just as in ordinary education, but in this case in its own realm. An example, among many thousands, of the activity which is carried on by extrasensory perception in Sufi service shows how miracles are linked with duty. Ibn Arabi, in his Ruh al-Quds, tells how one evening he felt an urge to go to see Abu Abdullah al-Khayyat, the tailor of Seville, and made his way a fair distance to see him. Al-Khayyat said, "Why were you so long? You have something with you which I need." Ibn Arabi took the 5 dirhams which he had in his pocket and gave them to him. The other Sufi told him that he had need of the money for a certain poor man called Ali al-Salawi.